The storm had rolled in faster than Clara Bennett expected. One moment the sky over the San Miguel Valley had been a calm, dusty blue, and the next it was split open by sharp streaks of silver lightning. The wind came in fierce, twisting gusts that pushed tumbleweeds across the trail and sent her mare, Juniper, dancing sideways in nervous circles. Clara, stubborn as ever, pulled her slicker tighter and kept riding. She had to get home before the storm worsened. Her younger brother was sick, and she'd promised to bring back medicine from town, but by the time she reached the riverbank, the world had already shifted into something wild and dangerous. The San Miguel, usually a gentle ribbon of water winding through cottonwoods, had turned into a churning brown monster. Swollen from the sudden cloudburst, the river slapped violently against its banks, ripping branches and debris downstream. Clara's heart thudded as she stared at it. She'd crossed this river 100 times in calmer weather, but now it looked like it wanted to swallow anything that dared touch it. Still, she pressed her lips together. She didn't have a choice. Juniper snorted and pawed the earth, tossing her head as if begging her to reconsider. "Easy, girl," Clara murmured, stroking the mare's neck. "We'll take it slow." But no amount of calm whispering could steady the horse once they stepped into the icy water. The current slammed into them like a living force, pulling at Juniper's legs with terrifying strength. The mare fought to keep her footing, ears flattened, muscles bunching beneath Clara's knees. Clara gripped the reins, breath sharp in her throat. "Come on, sweet girl." Just a little farther. They were halfway across when the worst happened. A giant branch, carried by the raging current, smashed into Juniper's flank. The mare reared, screaming. Clara's fingers slipped from the reins as the world tilted. She felt herself falling, felt the shock of the freezing river swallowing her whole. Water surged over her head, punched the air from her lungs, spun her like a rag doll. She clawed blindly for something, anything, but her hands found nothing but cold, furious water. Panic clawed at her ribs. Her chest burned. She didn't know which way was up anymore. For a dizzying moment, she thought, "This is it. I'm going to drown here alone." But then she wasn't alone. A strong arm wrapped around her waist from behind. Another hand caught her wrist with certainty, not hesitation. She was yanked upward, breaking through the surface with a choking gasp of air. The world blurred with rain and river spray, but she heard a voice deep, steady, unmistakably familiar. "Clara, I've got you." "Hold on." Her eyes flew open, stinging with water. A face hovered inches from her sharp cheekbones, black hair plastered to a strong brow, eyes dark as storm clouds. She knew those eyes. She'd known them since childhood, when he'd been the quiet, watchful boy who lived beyond the ridge. "Coda?" She choked out, disbelief and relief tangling in her voice. He didn't answer. His jaw set with fierce focus as he pulled her toward the bank. Every stroke he took was powerful, cutting through the current like a man built from the river itself. Clara clung to him, shivering violently, her breath shallow and panicked. They reached shallower water, and Coda lifted her as if she weighed nothing, carrying her up onto the muddy shore. She collapsed against him, coughing water, her body trembling uncontrollably. Rain hammered around them, but his arms were warm, solid, safe. He brushed wet strands of hair from her face, his thumb lingering on her cheek in a gesture so gentle it nearly broke her. "You're all right now," he murmured, voice low and rough. "I've got you." She looked up at him, breath catching. She had imagined seeing him again so many times, but never like this, not dripping wet and gasping in his arms, not saved from death by the boy she once adored. "Coda?" she whispered, unsure what else to say. His grip tightened, as if the river might still reach out and steal her away. His forehead touched hers for a heartbeat, grounding her in a way nothing else could. "I'm not letting go again," he said, and the words vibrated through her warm, fierce. and full of something she had never dared hope he still felt, something like devotion. Something like a promise. Something like the beginning of everything. Clara sat wrapped in Coda's woven blanket, still trembling as the storm rumbled across the sky, moving slowly toward the distant hills. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, but her heart hadn't slowed since he pulled her from the river. Thunder faded, but his nearness didn't. Coda knelt beside her, his broad shoulders rising and falling with quiet breaths as he checked her scraped palms and the bruise already forming along her arm. "You could have died," he said softly, though his tone held an edge she had never heard from him before. "Why would you cross in weather like this?" Clara swallowed. "My brother's sick. I had to get home." "I didn't think the river." "It doesn't matter what you thought," he cut in, but not unkindly. It sounded more like fear. Fear transformed into frustration. "The San Miguel swells fast after a storm. You know that." She nodded, staring at her hands. "I know." Coda exhaled sharply and sat back on his heels. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The storm filled the silence between them just as it had when they were younger. Two kids hiding under a jutting rock shelf during monsoon rain, waiting for the clouds to pass, sharing stories in whispers so the world wouldn't hear. Back then, the distance between them had felt enormous even when they sat side by side. Not because they didn't care, but because everyone around them made caring feel wrong. Clara's family hadn't approved of her spending time with Coda. The neighboring ranchers had made it clear they didn't want their children mixing with Apache families. And Coda, always protective even as a boy, would pull away before anyone could scold him for getting too close. Yet somehow, the memories between them had held strong. Clara looked up at him now, taking in the changes time had carved into him. The softness of his youth had hardened into sharp lines and defined strength. He had always been handsome, but now he was breathtaking in a way that made her chest tighten. "You look different," she murmured before she could stop herself. He raised a brow, a flicker of amusement breaking through the tension. "So do you." Their eyes met, and in that locked moment, Clara realized something startling. Coda had known exactly who he was rescuing in that river. There had been no hesitation, no uncertainty, just fierce recognition. How long have you been living near here?" Clara asked, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "2 winters," Coda replied. "I come down from the ridge for supplies, trade, work. Mostly keep to myself." That last remark stung more than she expected. "You never said anything," she said, trying and failing to hide the hurt in her tone. "You never came by the ranch." "Never checked in?" "I did." His voice was quiet, but it struck her harder than the river ever could. "You just didn't know." Her breath stalled. "You did?" "My people say it is better to watch from a distance than disrupt a settled life." His gaze dropped to the muddy ground. "Your family never wanted me around." "I thought maybe you didn't either." Clara's heart twisted. "Coda, that's not true, isn't it?" he asked, eyes lifting to hers with a depth that pinned her in place. "The last day I saw you, you rode off and didn't look back." She felt the words like a blade. "I was 16. My parents forced the move. I didn't have a choice." "And you never came back," he added quietly. Clara's throat tightened. "Because I thought you didn't want me to." Coda blinked slowly, as if trying to understand how two people could misread each other so painfully for so long. Then he reached out, taking her hand gently in his. His touch was warm, grounding, familiar in a way that made her stomach flutter. "I never forgot you," he murmured. "Not one day." The confession stole her breath. Before she could reply, a faint rumble rolled across the earth, not thunder this time, but distant hooves. Coda stiffened, head turning toward the sound. Clara frowned. "What is it?" "Riders," he said, rising to his feet with sudden tension coiling through his posture. "And they're not moving with the storm. They're coming this way." He offered her his hand again, not like a childhood friend this time, but like a man who intended to protect her no matter what came next. "Stay close." "Clara," he said, his voice steady but charged with something fierce that it wasn't fear. The sound of hooves grew louder, thudding against the soaked earth like distant war drums. Clara's pulse quickened. Coda's expression sharpened in a way she remembered from childhood, the same alert stillness he used to get when he sensed trouble long before anyone else did. Who would be out in this storm? Clara whispered, rising to her feet with the blanket clutched around her. "Not ranchers," Coda said. "They know the river cut off the road. Whoever's riding now isn't traveling, they're tracking." The word tracking set a chill through her that the storm never could. Coda stepped closer and gently cupped her elbow, steadying her. "You're still cold. You can't stay out here another minute. But your cabin. If someone's following, they're not after you," he said, voice low but certain. "If they see us together, they may guess wrong. Or assume worse. I need you under a roof, now." The firmness in his tone made her chest tighten. Coda had always been soft-spoken, careful with his words, but now he carried a quiet authority that felt both safe and dangerously irresistible. He grabbed her wet saddlebag, slung it over his shoulder, then guided her swiftly through the trees. The storm had weakened to a steady drizzle, but the air still smelled of danger-wet pine, churned mud, and the sharp metallic scent of swollen river water. Clara stumbled once, her soaked boots slipping in the mud. Coda caught her instantly, his hand steady on her waist. "You're freezing," he murmured. "We need to get you warm." His touch lingered a moment longer than necessary. She wasn't sure if it was because she needed it, or because he didn't want to let go. They pushed through a stand of juniper trees until a small, hand-built cabin appeared between the branches. Smoke drifted from its chimney in a thin line, barely visible against the gray sky. It wasn't much, but something about it, the carved beams, the clean yard, the hawk feather tied to the porch railing felt deeply, unmistakably like him. Coda ushered her inside first. The warmth hit her immediately. A fire snapped in the stone hearth, casting soft amber light across the single-room cabin. A simple bed of woven blankets sat against one wall, and shelves lined with herbs, tools, and hand-carved figures filled the space with quiet personality. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how dripping wet she was. Coda closed the door behind them and exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time since he pulled her from the river. Then he moved past her and grabbed a fresh blanket from a wooden trunk. "Sit," he said gently. "You're shaking again." Clara obeyed, settling on a sturdy bench near the fire. Coda knelt in front of her, wrapping the dry blanket around her shoulders with careful hands. His thumb brushed the hollow of her throat as he tucked the fabric in place, and heat rushed through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice embarrassingly soft. His eyes lifted to hers, dark, steady, filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "I told you. I'm not letting go again." Her breath hitched. Before she could answer, the distant hooves rumbled once more, this time nearer. Coda stood instantly, face tightening. He crossed the room to peer through the shuttered window. Clara rose too, gripping the blanket. "Are they really coming this way?" "Maybe," he murmured. "Or maybe they're just searching the riverbanks. Either way, you're not going back out there." "But my family, they'll be safer knowing the river kept you from coming home for the night," he said. "And you'll be safer here." She hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because staying in Coda's cabin alone with him, wrapped in his blanket, Surrounded by the warmth of his fire felt like stepping across a line she didn't know how to step back from. As if he sensed her thought, Coda touched the doorframe lightly, the way someone swears an oath. "You're not trapped," he said softly. "You're sheltered. There's a difference. And if you want to leave in the morning, I'll walk you all the way home." Her chest constricted. He was offering safety, not claiming ownership. Protection, not control. And that made the pull toward him even stronger. A sharp clap of hooves sounded outside closer, too close. Coda turned, meeting her eyes with calm certainty. "The storm kept you from crossing the river," he said. "Let me keep you from crossing danger." Clara nodded, breath trembling. Because deep down, she knew something she hadn't said aloud. The most dangerous thing tonight was not the outlaws outside. It was the way her heart leaned toward Coda, as if it had never stopped belonging to him. The fire crackled in the cabin, throwing flickering shadows across the walls and lighting Coda's sharp features in a way that made Clara's stomach flutter despite the storm outside. She had wrapped herself in the blanket he had given her, but the warmth from the fire and from him made the cloth feel almost redundant. She tried to focus on the sound of the rain tapping against the roof, but her eyes kept drifting to Coda as he moved about, checking the window, shifting a log in the hearth, and keeping one careful ear toward the distant sound of hooves outside. Finally, he sat on the floor near the fire, facing her, letting the flames illuminate the intensity in his eyes. There was a tension in the room that had nothing to do with the storm. Clara could feel it as palpably as the wet chill lingering on her skin. "You're quiet," Coda said. His voice was low, rough from the cold wind and rain, but softer somehow when he looked at her. Clara hesitated, searching for words she hadn't spoken in years. "I didn't think I'd see you again. Not like this? Not after all these years." His eyes darkened, a mixture of longing and regret flashing in them. "You left," he said simply. "The day you rode away, I thought I'd lost you forever." Clara's throat tightened. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I had no choice. My family. They moved us away. And I thought you wouldn't want me anymore." Coda's jaw tightened. "I never stopped thinking about you. Every day I wondered if you were safe, if you were happy, if you even remembered me." "I remembered," she whispered, her fingers tightening around the blanket. "Every day. I couldn't forget you, Coda. I tried not to because I thought maybe it was wrong. Maybe we weren't supposed to be." He leaned closer, closing the small distance between them. "Wrong?" he echoed, his voice low and full of a quiet intensity that made her heart hammer. "Clara, the only wrong thing was thinking I could ever let you go and not fight for you." Her breath caught, and she felt a rush of emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The ache of longing, the sting of lost time, and the undeniable pull of what had always been between them. She wanted to reach for him, to close the gap, but fear and pride held her back. You didn't come back," she said softly, almost a whisper. "Even when I hoped, I came as much as I could," he interrupted gently. "I kept my distance because I didn't want to hurt you, or anyone else. But when I saw you in that river today, I couldn't stay distant anymore." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she couldn't stop them. I'm glad you didn't. I'm so glad." For a moment, they just looked at each other, letting the words they couldn't say hang between them. Then Coda reached out, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek, his thumb lingering on her skin in a way that made her knees weaken. "You've grown," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not just into the woman you are now, but into someone I could never forget, someone I've waited for all this time." Clara's chest ached with a mixture of relief and desire. She had loved him silently for years, and now he was here, tangible, solid, holding her gaze like he had always known she belonged with him. "I waited too," she said, her voice breaking, "even when I didn't know if you cared anymore." Koda's hand moved to cup her face fully now, his thumb stroking her cheek as he leaned closer. "I've never stopped caring," he said firmly, "and I won't let you go again. Not tonight. Not ever." The warmth of his hand, the firelight, and the storm outside combined into a moment of clarity. Clara realized she didn't have to fight anymore. She didn't have to hide her feelings or her heart. It was already spoken in the way Koda held her, in the intensity of his gaze, in the unshakable promise that he would never let her go. Her lips parted and she whispered almost to herself, "I've waited too." A soft smile touched his lips, and the distance between them vanished. Koda leaned in, their foreheads touching first, letting the world fade into the firelight and the sound of the rain, before finally closing the last gap with a kiss tender, fierce, and full of every year of longing neither of them had spoken aloud. And in that small cabin, with the storm raging outside, Clara knew that the past no longer mattered. What mattered was now. What mattered was Koda. What mattered was the promise that neither of them would ever let go again. The rhythmic thrum of hooves against the muddy earth grew louder, sharper, and closer. Koda's hand moved to the doorframe, his fingers tightening around the wood. Clara stood behind him, blanket clutched tightly to her chest, and tried to calm the sudden spike of fear in her chest. The storm had passed, leaving a damp, heavy silence outside. But now the danger wasn't the river or the rain, it was the sound of riders coming, deliberate and unyielding. Koda's jaw tightened. "They're looking for trouble," he muttered. His dark eyes scanned the horizon through a crack in the shutters. "Outlaws. Likely after horses, or someone they think has something valuable." Clara's stomach churned. "Valuable? They won't leave us alone? They won't leave anyone standing in their way." Koda moved to her side, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Stay close. Don't make a sound." The riders' shadows flickered across the cabin walls as the first lanterns bobbed through the trees. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. She'd heard stories of outlaws in the valley men who took what they wanted and left, nothing behind, but she had never seen them this close. Her fear wrestled with another feeling, something deep in her chest that refused to shrink from Koda's presence. "They'll find us," she whispered, voice trembling. Koda's hand tightened around hers. "Not if I can help it." "Step back." "Behind me." The first rider appeared, cautiously scouting the edge of the cabin. Koda's eyes flicked to the fireplace and then to the stack of wood beside it. He grabbed a heavy log, not wasting a second, and moved with the ease of a man accustomed to danger. Clara held her breath as he prepared to defend them, her mind racing with every worst-case scenario. Then another rider appeared, and Koda's stance shifted calm, precise, like a predator assessing his surroundings. He didn't panic, didn't hesitate. His focus was absolute, centered on protecting her. Clara realized with a jolt of awe that he had changed into something more than the boy she had once known. He was now a man who could take on anyone and refuse to falter. The outlaws dismounted, spreading across the clearing. One stepped close to the cabin, shouting over the wind and drizzle, "We know someone's in there. Open up." Koda's lips pressed into a thin line. "No," he muttered, almost to himself. Then he looked at Clara. "Stay behind me. Don't move." She obeyed, pressed to the wall as he positioned himself between her and the door. When the first outlaw tried to force the cabin door open, Koda's strength, combined with a swift, decisive shove, sent him stumbling back into the mud. The others hesitated, unsure of what they were facing. Clara's heart pounded as she watched Koda move swift, calculated, protective. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Every motion was meant to shield her. She had always remembered him as brave, but this was something fiercer. One of the outlaws raised a rifle, but Koda was faster. He grabbed a loose log from the floor, swung it with precision, and sent the man sprawling to the ground. The remaining riders faltered, realizing this was not an easy target. Koda's gaze flicked toward Clara. "Stay low," he warned. She obeyed, ducking behind the bench, her pulse racing, but also a strange thrill coursing through her. She had never seen him like this, not so alive, so dominant, so undeniably in control. Even in danger, the connection between them pulsed stronger than fear. Finally, after tense moments that felt like hours, the outlaws exchanged wary glances. Koda's presence, his fierce protection, and the promise in his eyes convinced them that this cabin was not worth a fight. They retreated, melting back into the trees, leaving only the echo of their hooves behind. Clara exhaled shakily, her hands trembling as she emerged from behind the bench. Koda wiped his forehead, a small smirk flickering across his face despite the tension. "You're safe," he said softly, though his eyes still scanned the perimeter. "For now." Clara stepped toward him, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and admiration. "That was incredible," she whispered. You didn't hesitate for a second." Koda's gaze softened as he finally turned fully toward her. He reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face, his touch grounding her like nothing else ever had. "I'll never hesitate to protect you," he said quietly, almost a promise. "Not again." And in that moment, Clara realized something she had known all along. This was no longer just about survival. This was about trust, about connection, about the man who had saved her from the river and would fight anyone, anything to keep her safe. The storm outside had passed, but the storm of desire and devotion between them was only just beginning. The night had settled into an uneasy silence. Rain had stopped, leaving the cabin's roof dripping steadily, the rhythmic patter of water on the wooden shingles echoing like distant drums. Clara's hands were still trembling, though not from cold this time. She had witnessed Koda's strength and skill, and part of her heart had swelled with awe, but another part still feared what might come next. Outlaws like those could return, and if they did, she would be at the mercy of his ability to protect her. Koda stood by the window, gaze sharp, listening. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready to react. "They could be circling back," he muttered. His voice carried a weight that made Clara's chest tighten. "Or they could be waiting for dawn. Either way, you can't step outside until I say it's safe." "I trust you," she whispered, almost instinctively. The words felt strange, foreign on her tongue, yet entirely true. She had trusted him all her life, even when circumstances had driven them apart. Now that trust was alive and urgent. He turned toward her, eyes dark and intent. "You have to be ready," he said. "I can protect you, yes, but you have to stay alert. If they try anything, move. Move fast. And stay behind me." Clara nodded. She could feel her heart hammering in anticipation, but a strange clarity settled over her. Fear was there, yes, but it was tempered by something stronger, the certainty that Koda would not let anything happen to her. Hours passed. Each second stretched thin with tension. Then the unmistakable sound of breaking branches announced the outlaws' return. They were cautious now, but determined, and they spread through the perimeter with calculated precision. Koda moved silently, every motion deliberate, positioning himself to shield Clara without revealing their exact location. The first outlaw reached the cabin's door. Koda's hand moved like lightning, pushing the man back with precise force. A scuffle erupted outside as the others tried to force the entry, but Koda was faster, intercepting them one by one, striking with power and control that seemed almost preternatural. Clara's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to run, to help in any way she could. But Koda's calm authority held her frozen, yet safe. He was a whirlwind of movement, his every action fueled by a singular purpose, to protect her. One of the outlaws lunged for the window, and Koda met him mid-motion, grappling with a strength that made Clara's chest ache. The man fell, and Koda's sharp gaze met hers, a silent question blazing between them. "Are you ready to choose?" Clara realized what he meant. She had the choice to cower in fear, to hide behind the blanket of safety, or to trust herself and him completely. The decision surged in her chest like fire. She would not run from this man. She would not run from the feelings that had haunted her since childhood. She would stand by him, no matter the risk. "I'm ready," she whispered. Voice steady despite her pounding heart. Koda's lips curved into the faintest smile before he returned his attention to the remaining outlaws. Together, they moved in a synchronized dance, he as the protector, she as the trusted partner, aware of every step, every breath, every movement. And when the last of the outlaws realized they could not breach the cabin, they retreated into the night. Leaving the clearing empty and silent once more, Clara sank to her knees by the fire, her hands shaking, but not from fear alone. Koda knelt beside her, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. "You were amazing," he said quietly. "Stronger than you know. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice soft. Koda's hand moved to her cheek, thumb tracing a gentle path along her skin. "No," he said firmly. "You could have. But I promise this. I will always be here to fight for you, to protect you, to make sure no harm comes your way. And I'll never let you face it alone." Clara's chest swelled with a mixture of relief, admiration, and something deeper she could no longer ignore. She leaned into him instinctively, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her own. The danger had passed, but the bond between them had only grown stronger. For the first time in years, Clara realized that the life she had feared losing was already hers, not in possession, but in trust, in loyalty, and in a love that refused to be denied. And Koda, standing with her in the aftermath of the storm and the attack, knew this was just the beginning. The cabin was quiet now, save for the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional drip of rain from the eaves. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging that the danger had passed, if only for the moment. Clara sank onto the bench near the hearth, still trembling from adrenaline, though now her nerves were tinged with a different emotion, relief, awe, and something deeper she could not yet name. Koda moved to sit beside her, careful not to crowd her, yet close enough that the heat from his body seeped into hers. He reached for a cloth, dampened it in warm water from the kettle, and gently dabbed at a scrape on her arm. His touch was firm but tender, every movement deliberate, as if he were trying to convey more than words could. "You're hurt," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. "But it's nothing serious." "I'm fine," Clara said, though her voice wavered. It's more the fear than the wounds." Koda nodded, understanding. His gaze softened, and for the first time since she had arrived at his cabin, he seemed willing to let down the armor of stoicism that had carried him through the night. "Clara, I need to tell you something," he began, his voice low, deliberate. "Something I've held for a long time." Her heart skipped. She had waited for this moment in her own way, though she had never dared hope it would come. "What is it?" she whispered. "I never forgot you," he said, the words simple but heavy with the weight of years. "Not one day. Not a single day since you left. I tried to keep my distance because I thought it was what was best. But the truth is, I never stopped thinking about you, wondering if you were safe, wondering if you ever remembered me." Clara's chest tightened. The dam of emotions she had held back for years threatened to break. "Koda, I thought you didn't care." I thought you had forgotten me. I tried not to think about you because I didn't want to hurt myself." His hand lifted, cupping her cheek, thumb tracing the curve of her jaw with a tenderness that made her stomach twist. "How could I forget you?" he asked quietly. "You've always been part of me. Always. And tonight I realized I can't let you go again. Not ever." Tears threatened to spill, and Clara's lips trembled. I've never stopped caring either," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Even when I thought it was wrong, even when I told myself I should move on. You were always there."
"Always in my thoughts, always in my heart."
Koda's eyes darkened, and his expression softened at the same time. "Then we don't have to pretend anymore," he said, leaning closer. "You don't have to hide your feelings from me. I know yours, and I'm not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of you." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had waited years for this acknowledgement, this confession of mutual longing, and now it was real, tangible, undeniable. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining as if they had been made to fit together. "I was scared," she admitted, her forehead resting against his. "Scared I'd lost you forever." "You didn't lose me," he whispered, his lips brushing her temple. "Not now, not ever. And I promise I'll never let anything take you from me again." Her chest swelled, a mixture of relief, joy, and longing. She pressed closer, feeling the warmth of his body, the strength in his arms, the certainty in his gaze. "I believe you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Koda's hand slid to the back of her neck, tilting her face toward his. Their eyes locked, a silent understanding passing between them. Years of longing, of unspoken words, of fear and separation, all of it culminated in this moment. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the gap. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, a promise, an acknowledgement of the years they had waited. Then it deepened, fierce and consuming, fueled by every heartbeat, every thought, every memory of lost time. When they finally parted, their foreheads rested together, breaths mingling. The cabin was quiet once more, but the air between them was electric, charged with the undeniable truth of their bond. "I'm not letting go again," Koda whispered. Echoing the words he had spoken the night he saved her from the river. Clara smiled through her tears, her fingers brushing against his. "Then don't," she whispered back, and in that small, fire-lit cabin, with the storm behind them and the world waiting outside, they finally allowed themselves to believe that nothing, not distance, not fear, not danger, could ever pull them apart again. Dawn broke slowly over the San Miguel Valley, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and rose. The storm had passed completely, leaving the world washed clean, the river returning to its gentle, winding flow. Clara stood at the cabin door, wrapped in a dry blanket, breathing in the crisp morning air. For the first time in what felt like forever, the world seemed calm, safe, and full of possibility. Behind her, Koda moved quietly, gathering the remnants of the night, checking the fire, securing the cabin, and keeping one vigilant eye toward the horizon. Yet when he turned and saw her standing there, light catching in her hair, he didn't see fear or hesitation. He saw the woman he had loved since childhood, the one he had never stopped waiting for, the one he had promised to protect and never let go. Clara's gaze met his, and in that instant, all the distance, all the lost years, and all the unspoken words collapsed into a single undeniable truth. They belonged together. Her heart swelled, and she felt the pull she had tried to deny for so long, the pull that had brought her here, into his arms, through the storm. And beyond the danger, Koda stepped closer, his long strides carrying him swiftly to her side. His hand reached for hers, and she didn't hesitate. She placed her fingers in his, feeling the strength in his grip, the steady warmth that had held her through the night. "Clara," he murmured, his voice low but full of certainty. "I've never let go, not really. And I'm not going to start now." She smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "Then I don't want you to." He pulled her closer, careful but insistent, their bodies aligning as if they were two halves finally made whole. The soft morning light wrapped around them like a blessing, the valley serene and still, bearing witness to the bond that had endured time, separation, and danger. Coda brushed damp strands of hair from her face, his thumb lingering along her cheek. "I promised you once in the river that I wouldn't let go," he said, voice husky. "And I'll say it again, I'm not letting go. Not ever." Clara's chest pressed against his, her arms wrapping around his waist. "And I'll never let you go either," she whispered, the words carrying all the weight of years and longing. Trust and desire, fear and hope doubt for a long moment. They simply held each other, listening to the gentle rustle of the trees, the quiet murmur of the river, and the rhythm of their own hearts beating in sync. It was a silence full of understanding, a promise sealed without need for further words. Finally, Coda leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a culmination of every moment they had missed, every longing they had kept secret, every heartbeat that had carried them to this morning. Clara responded with equal intensity, her hands tangling in his hair, drawing him closer, feeling the solid reassurance of his presence. When they finally parted, their foreheads rested together, breaths mingling, eyes locked in unspoken acknowledgment of the life that awaited them. There was no need to plan or rush. For the first time, they had each other fully, and that was enough. Coda's hand lingered at the small of her back as he whispered, "We've survived storms, rivers, and danger. But nothing matters more than this. Nothing will take you from me, Clara. Not now, not ever." Her smile was radiant, tears glinting like tiny jewels in the morning sun. "And I've waited for this, for you, for us, always." The river flowed quietly behind them, the valley stretching out in endless possibility. They turned together, walking back into the cabin, into the warmth of the fire and each other's arms. The world outside had healed, and now, in each other, they had found a home, a promise, and a love that would never let go again. And as the sun climbed higher over the San Miguel Valley, Coda held her tight, whispering once more, a vow that would never falter, "I'm not letting go again." Clara pressed her face to his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and whispered back, "Then don't." For them, the river was no longer a place of danger. The storm was no longer a threat. And the world, finally, was full of hope, safety, and a love that had endured everything to arrive here, at last, in each other's arms.